Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Elder Michael Stibick from Higher Ground Temple at 203 Vine Street in Camden, New Jersey. I'm here with you on another beautiful Monday morning. Yes, I said it, another beautiful Monday morning. Going back to work for another week, but I am glad in that. I'm glad that God has blessed me to have a job to go to this week so that I can provide for my family. Amen, so that I can provide for myself, so that I can provide for those around me. Amen. And He is working out some things in my life. It's good to see there's my lovely wife on there already. Like I said, it is a beautiful Monday morning. Amen. Now I haven't seen the SUN yet. But I was woken up by the SON this morning. That's right. I haven't seen the sun up in the sky. Amen. But I have seen the sun that saved me. Amen. And I thank God for it this morning. And we have a word for you, a continuing word here, as we kind of fell into a little bit of a study here, a little bit of breakdown here, a little bit of a series here on achieving the purpose that God has for our lives, about how to walk into the plan that He has for us. Amen. We make a lot of our own plans. We think we've got things figured out on how to get to a certain place or do a certain thing. But the way to really get there, amen, is just to follow the plan that God has for us. Amen. Is to follow the plan that He has for us. And so we're going to be looking today at the book of Genesis, chapter 41. Amen. We're looking at part 3 of fulfilling God's purpose in our lives. And we've been studying this man, Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob, who became Israel. And Joseph was the first son that he had by his beloved wife, amen. His beloved wife Rachel, on whom he adored, amen. So Joseph had a particular soft spot in Dad's heart, amen, and it led to some problems. If you remember from the series on last Thursday, we looked at the early part of Joseph's life. Amen. We looked at Joseph when he was just a teenager. Amen. He had some dreams, and his brothers didn't like the interpretation of his dreams. So his brothers had decided, they had set in their mind to kill Joseph. They had said in mind, we're tired of this kid saying that we're gonna bow down to him. It's good to see you on there. Taka Stiegel, good to Tosca Siegel. Good to see you on there this morning. We are here talking about, amen, how to achieve God's purpose in your life, and we are here talking about. We started out with Joseph. At the beginning of his life as a young man, he had his brothers were jealous of him because he had prophesied, amen, that God was going to do great things through him. It had been prophesied to him through dreams, amen, that his own brothers and sister, his own brothers and his mother and father were going to bow down before him, and they got jealous. They decided, we're going to kill him. But instead of killing him, as they were getting ready to kill him, they said, you know what? Why should we kill him and have his blood on our hands? They said, why don't we just sell him, amen, so we can get something out of it too, amen. Why don't we just sell him into slavery, amen. And from this we learned that we need to thank God for the things that He didn't let happen. From this thing, Donna Hawkins, it's good to see you on there this morning. From this lesson, amen, this first lesson, we learned that some of those things, amen, that we didn't want to go through, some of those things that we complain about, was actually God's way of keeping us from our destruction, amen. That some of those things were the way that God kept us, amen. He sold them into slavery, but it was to keep them out of, amen. It was to keep them from being destroyed, from being killed, amen. And this is the beautiful thing, is that God not only got him out of his destruction, amen, but that very act of being sold into slavery, that's what put him on the path, amen, to his purpose, amen. That's what's got him into Egypt. That's what got him where God needed him to be to fulfill the purpose that God had for him. And from this we learn, hey, you know what? We need to thank God for the things that He didn't let happen, because those often are the very things that put us where God needed us to be. Amen. So when the bad things happen, when something comes up against you, don't complain about it. Don't fight so much against it. Just make the best you can out of the situation, because that might be the very thing that God is using to bless you. Amen. So that was the first lesson last Thursday. Then on Saturday we came back And what do we talk about on Saturday? We talked about work in all things as though for the Lord, right? So now we're looking at Genesis chapter 39 when we talked about work in all things as though for the Lord. And here we picked up Joseph as a slave in Israel. But as he was a slave a slave in Egypt, I apologize. So he's a slave in Egypt, and we see that he's serving his master as a slave, and he does everything for his master as if it's for the Lord. Amen. And so he gets elevated by the master. Now everything that he has is under the master, is that the master has is under Joseph's hands. Amen. The master doesn't think about anything because he knows it's in hands that are serving God. Amen. But even in this, now all of a sudden Joseph again is going through because now his master's wife, Potiphar's wife, has now accused him of trying to sleep with her. Amen. And so Potiphar has gotten angry at Joseph and he's put him in prison. But even in prison, what does Joseph do? Joseph works as though for the Lord. Amen. He continues to do what the Lord has calls him to do. Amen. And so what happens? Now within the prison, amen, the warden, the jailer, amen, the captain of the guard, he keeps elevating Joseph until really Joseph, he's a prisoner in the prison, but he's running the prison. He's running the prison. The Patricia Phillips, good to see you on this morning. The prison, the captain of the guard has said, you know what, I'm taking my hands off it. You run it, Joseph, because you can do it better than me anyway. Amen. So here we see Joseph. He hasn't complained about the thing that came against him. He's done the best he can with it. He's realized, amen, it has maybe put me where I need to be, and he's continued to work for the Lord. But yet at the end of chapter 39, he was still in prison. Amen. So we know there's more to come. Amen. For Joseph get to the purpose that God has for his life. Now, what happens at chapter 39? Now, we're jumping down to chapter 41 here, and we're jumping down to chapter 41 so that we can look at, don't forget where your help comes from, right? So we're going to look at don't forget where your help comes from. So now we're jumping down to 41. So I'm just going to give you a quick summary of what happened in chapter 40. So in chapter 40, you've got Joseph. He's got two prisoners. The cupbearer and the chief baker for Pharaoh have been put into prison with Joseph. They both have a dream, and Joseph prophesies to them about their dreams. He tells the cupbearer, he says, you know what? You are going to be restored before the king, before Pharaoh, that once again you will be placing Pharaoh's cup in his hand. Amen. And he tells the baker, he goes, you're going to be lifted up in a different way, though. You're going to be lifted up and impaled and beheaded. Amen. So here we have, he's prophesied both, he's interpreted correctly the dreams of these two men in the prison. Amen. And so now time has gone by. And here you go. Here's the thing. So this cupbearer who he gave the good news to, that he was going to be restored, as the cupbearer says, you know what, Joseph, I'll never forget you. As soon as I get out of this prison, I'm going to tell everybody about the good work that you did. Amen. But what happens? I love it. People don't always follow through. Thank God that God always follows through on what he says, because people we know do not always. So now what happens? We're jumping into chapter 41, and we're seeing, here's how it starts out. When 2 full years had passed. Amen. So we know what? It's been 2 years. That cupbearer who said, I'm not going to forget what you did for me. I'm going to let everybody know about it. You know, it's been 2 years and he hasn't said a word to anybody. So you know what happens? Oh, this is why people may not be faithful, but God is. So God says, you know what? The cupbearer hasn't said anything. He said, so I'm going to put something before the cupbearer, amen, that's going to bring back to his recollection what Joseph did for him. So we see what happened is now at chapter 41, I'm going to just kind of tell the story because it doesn't start off with Joseph yet. It starts off chapter 41 with Pharaoh. So 2 full years after after Joseph, amen, excuse me for the slip there, 2 years after Joseph had interpreted the dreams for the cupbearer, amen. Now all of a sudden Pharaoh has had a dream. Pharaoh has had this dream where he's standing by the Nile, and out of the river comes seven cows, sleek and fat and healthy. And then what happens is 7 skinny, withered, emaciated cows come up and eat the 7 healthy cows. Amen. The Pharaoh wakes up and he's disturbed by the dream, goes back to sleep, and he has a second dream. In the second dream, there's a stalk of wheat. Amen. And it's got 7 heads on it, and 7 healthy, good heads of grain. Amen. And then what happens? All of a sudden, 7 withered, sickly, amen, grains pop up, and they devour the 7 healthy grains. Amen. So Pharaoh was disturbed. Pharaoh was worried. Pharaoh was trying to figure out what these dreams mean. He calls everybody he has in his cabinet, all his sorcerers, all his wizards, all his counselors. Amen. And nobody can interpret this dream. But what happens is God is so good that he had the cupbearer standing there, amen, as Pharaoh was worrying about this dream. And so the cupbearer says, you know what? That reminds me of something. I remember I had a dream one time and nobody could interpret the dream for me. He says, you know what? The cupbearer says, you know what? This is the thing. He says to Pharaoh, he says, you know what? This I want to read now. I'm picking up at verse 9 of chapter 41. So verse 9 of chapter 41 says, then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Amen. Thank God that he will bring it back to people's recollection. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Each of us, now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly the way he interpreted them to us. So we say Joseph gave us just what God gave him, nothing more, nothing less. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. Amen. So this is what I love. See, this is why I say, so here we see that before Joseph, amen, ever got before Pharaoh to use this gift that God gave him to interpret dreams, before Joseph ever got before Pharaoh, he didn't reserve it just for people of power. He didn't reserve this gift of interpreting dreams just for people who could do something for him. But here it was a prisoner, amen, in the house of the captain of the guard, amen. And yet Joseph, we see, had already shared this gift with him. He did it for a prisoner. So this is what we can learn from this here, that it was a cupbearer, amen, who came before Pharaoh and shared what Joseph had done. When God gives you a gift, don't just try and save it for people of power. Don't just try and save it for people of status. Amen. Share your gift with everyone, because you know why? You don't know who the person is going to be that's going to help you get before the one that's going to help you get to your purpose. Amen. You may go out and you may help someone that you don't even know. You may go out and help someone that you don't even think can help you a bit. Amen. But they might be the one, that person that you thought couldn't do anything for you, they might be the one that is before, amen, the millionaire that's got the money to fund the dream that God has put in your heart. Amen. So don't be stingy with the gifts that God. We see Joseph, man, he had an opportunity to share God's gift, and he did it even with a prisoner who he thought couldn't do anything for him. Amen. A prisoner, amen, who was reporting to him, a prisoner that he had rule over, and yet he shared the gift with him. Why? Because God had given it to him, and he said, it's not mine, amen, to keep within me. He said, I got to share the gift. And so this person who it looked like wouldn't be able to do a thing for Joseph is actually the one, amen, who's now bringing him before Pharaoh, who's Pharaoh is the one that is needed, amen, for Joseph to fulfill the plan, to fulfill the purpose that God had for Joseph. I love the way that God works, man. If we are just faithful with the things that he gives us, he's going to make sure that we get before the people that we need to be before. He's going to make sure that we have all the provision that we need, as long as we're continuing to push toward the vision that he gave us. So then what happens now? So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. This is verse 14. So we see that Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and Joseph didn't run off half-cocked. Joseph made sure he was prepared, amen, before he went and saw the one that was going to bring it. So, and this is just a little bit of practical knowledge, amen. It's like going to a job interview where I work at, amen. We've had some turnover, we've had some layoffs, we had some people that because of the coronavirus said they can't work anymore, and yet you got people coming in for interviews at the bank, amen, and coming in literally. I've had managers tell me that people are coming in like sweatpants, in jeans, in t-shirts. When you get that opportunity, amen, when God presents you with the opportunity, you got to remember that the person that God is using to bless you, amen, They are not God themselves. They're not looking at your heart. Amen. When you get the opportunity to go before the one that you need to fulfill God's plan, amen. You got to know how to work with that person as well. Amen. You can't be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. Amen. You got to see he cleaned himself up before he went before Pharaoh. He didn't say, well, you know what? I can go before Pharaoh any old way. Amen. Why? Because God's on my side. No. But see what he does. He knows that he's working with a man here. So what does he do? He cleans himself up. So when you've got that opportunity and you're dependent on another person, amen, make yourself presentable before you go. Do a little research on the person that's going to be helping you so that when you get there, amen, you've got all the tools that you need, amen, to get what God needs you to get, amen, in that situation, amen. So then we see now he's before Pharaoh, and we're picking up at verse 15 now. Verse 15 says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now I'm going to pause here for a second. I'm going to read that to you one more time. Was the next verse is the key verse, amen, in our study today, amen. The next verse is the verse that we need to make sure we get. It's the verse that we need to understand. So everybody, if you've been cooking breakfast, if you've been walking the dog, sit down as we get to this verse, amen, because this is the one that we need to understand. This is the one that if we do not follow it, will trip us up every time. See, because Pharaoh, I'm going to read it again. 15 says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Amen. Now here comes Joseph's response. And this needs to be the response that we have. Amen. Joseph says, I cannot do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Amen. I love it. See, that's what we need to do. See, because what do we have? Here we have Joseph. Amen. Joseph is going through the struggle, amen. He was about to be killed. He was sold into slavery. Joseph, even in spite of being sold into slavery, he's been doing everything right. He's been working as though for the Lord, amen. And this is where sometimes we are at the finish line, amen. And then all of a sudden we get ourselves in trouble at the finish line. Why? Because now we start trying to take credit for where we're at. We try to take credit, amen, for finishing the race, amen. This is the key verse here. Joseph has been on point. He's done exactly what God has called him to do, amen. But it's a situation right now. It's easy to do the right thing because the right thing is just to give God the glory and recognize that it's God that put you there. But you know what? It's so easy to do the wrong thing too, amen. It's so easy to get the big head and to be proud of ourselves that we did right. All we did, amen, was follow along with all we did was ride God's coattails. But it's easy for us in our flesh, amen, to say, yeah, look at what I can do. He's interpreted the dreams because he's the one that spoke the words when the dream was interpreted. But he knows that it was God that gave it to him. So it would be so easier to say, yeah, I've interpreted dreams correctly many times. I'm sure that I can step up and do it for you now. But Joseph has the proper answer, amen. And that proper answer is, I can't do it, but God can, and God will come through for you. I know because he's done it before. I know that he'll do it again. See, what's so important about this is it shows Joseph's mindset. It shows that Joseph is still relying on God. Amen. When someone comes up and says, I've heard you're great at this, I've heard you're great at that, and we just say yes, see, that shows our mindset. That shows that we have gotten afar off, amen, from who has brought us to where we're at. Amen. So as the accolades come forth, as you're now being presented before the people that you need to fulfill the plan in God's life, never forget where your help comes from, because your help comes from the Lord. Amen. And so here we see this is the key here, and this is the key verse. So I'm going to say it one more time. Remember where your help comes from. That's right. Jerry Stibick, that's a true humility. Amen. True humility. God says that the meek shall inherit the earth, not the weak. Amen. But the meek, what does that mean? That means if we're meek, that means we've got power, but we know where our power comes from. Amen. And our help comes from the Lord. Amen. So Joseph speaks. Now Joseph is still saying, you know what, God, I know it's you that's going to do it. Because if Joseph had tried to take the credit, if Joseph had said, yeah, look how great I am, God may not have come through him. God may have said, you know what? This guy's not ready for the blessing I have for him yet, because he still thinks that he's the one doing it. Amen. But he said he has the right response. He says, know that God did it. Amen. So Pharaoh shares the dream with Joseph. And he tells Joseph about this dream. He tells him about the fact that he had the two dreams in one. He says, I had these sleek, healthy, fat cows, and they were eaten up by seven withered, emaciated, starved cows. Amen. And yet, after these emaciated cows ate the fat cows, the cows that were still emaciated. They didn't even get healthy from eating the healthy cows. And then what happens is he starts telling them about the grains of wheat. He says, here it goes, the seven healthy heads of grains of wheat, and it gets eaten up by the seven withered, scorched heads of grain. Amen. But yet the seven scorched, withered heads of grain still look withered. They still look scorched. They still look weak. Even though they ate them up, they look no better for it. And then Joseph now is ready to interpret the dream for him. And Joseph says that these two dreams are the same thing. God gave you the dream twice because it is set, it is locked in, it is loaded, it is gonna happen. There's no way to turn this around. So God has given you this dream twice. And he tells him, Joseph tells him, you know what? It means that you're going to have 7 great, abundant years. He said, you're going to have plenty. You're going to have more than you need. He says, amen. And then what's going to happen? You're going to have 7 years of famine after that. You're going to have 7 years where there's a drought in the land, and 7 years where the land is not going to produce. He said, so you got to be prepared for that. But I love it. So Joseph interprets the dream. Joseph gives him the interpretation of the dream that God gives him. Amen. But we're going to pick up now in verse 33, and we're going to see what Joseph does after he shares the interpretation of the dream that God gives him. In verse 33, Joseph goes on to tell Pharaoh, after he's interpreted the dream for him, he says, and now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all this food in these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. So now Joseph has given him, not just given him the interpretation of the dream, but now Joseph has given him good counsel based on the revelation of God, that to help him get ahead instead of thinking about just how to promote himself. So Joseph could have just said, here's the interpretation of the dream, amen. And I'm sure that Pharaoh would have blessed him. Pharaoh would have recognized him, probably would have gotten him out of prison, amen. But yet Joseph goes, he says, you know what, but I'm not going to withhold anything from Pharaoh. I'm not going to withhold anything. I'm going to give liberally to Pharaoh. Amen. And so instead of just stopping at interpreting the dream, getting himself out of prison and settling for that, because sometimes we settle, amen, just for that minimum. Sometimes we settle just for getting out of prison. But instead, Joseph goes on. He gives Pharaoh good counsel to help Pharaoh prosper. He tells him, look, in the 7 good years, you're going to have more than you need. He says, take a fifth of whatever is produced, and don't be glutton. Don't consume it, even though you don't need to consume it. Take 1/5 and store it away in barns. It's good counsel. Amen. So now what happens with the good counsel? So now we hear how next in verse 37, we're going to look at how Pharaoh responds to the good counsel that Joseph gave based on the interpretation of the dream. And in verse 37, Pharaoh says, the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. Verse 40 says, you shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Amen. So he's saying, I got the title, but you've got the power. He says, I've got the title, but you've got the power. Why? Because Joseph recognized God as the source of his strength, because Joseph then said, you know what, I'm not just going to get what I can get out of interpreting this dream, but I'm going to help Pharaoh to prosper. He says, you know, Pharaoh, amen, God is going to make sure that Pharaoh prospers Joseph, because Joseph has helped Pharaoh to prosper. Amen. So don't, when you get to that position, now you're in front of the person who can help you. Don't just say, what can I get out of this relationship? I've already acknowledged God was the source. They've appreciated that. Now, don't just say, what can I get out of this? But look at how can we both prosper? Amen. Because the more I help that person that I've linked to, amen, prosper, now all of a sudden they can help me prosper as well, because he responded the right way, because he responded that God was the one that gave him the ability, because he responded with good counsel and not just giving him the information he needed to get what Joseph wanted. Amen. Instead, he helped Pharaoh to prosper. And so we see that he is blessed for helping Pharaoh to prosper. Now he is put over all the land of Egypt. Amen. No, the only way, Pharaoh said, even the only way that I'm greater than you is that I have the throne, that I have the title. Amen. He says, you've got power, amen, in the land of Egypt. Amen. And so we see that over the next 7 years, things are going as Joseph had promised. They have the 7 years of abundance, and Joseph has been taking a fifth of what he has, and he's been storing it away in barns. And as this is going on, he gets married, he has children, there's all kinds of things going on. And then in verse 50, we're going to jump down to verse 53 of Genesis 39 now, and it says that the 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was a famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. Amen. Verse 55 says, when all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, go to Joseph and do what he tells you. Amen. So I love this. Now we see that Joseph's plan. Now Joseph has blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh has blessed Joseph. Amen. And yet we see now the famine has come. Now the hard times are coming. And when the hard time comes, Joseph's not just looking out for Pharaoh. Joseph's just not looking out for the royal family. Joseph's not just looking out for the elite, amen, who have the power in the land of Egypt. But everybody is coming to Joseph, and Joseph is blessing everybody with the food that they need to sustain themselves. So it's not just, again, it's about, we see the mindset of Joseph here as he's on the path to God's plan for him, as he's on the path to God's purpose for him. We just see people getting blessed all along the way. Not just people that can help him, not just people that can do things for him, amen. But we saw the cupbearer was blessed. We saw that Pharaoh was blessed. And now we see everyone in the land of Egypt is blessed. Why? Because Joseph is following the plan that God has for him to get to the fulfillment of his purpose in his life. And we see here that too, that Joseph, amen, Joseph is a good steward with what God has given. We need to be good stewards as God leads us along the path. We need to be good stewards with what God has given us. Amen. He's not just turning everything loose and saying, everybody come raid the storehouses, but people have to come, amen, and take just what they need to make sure they've got this abundance. They've got the storehouses full, but the people have got to come, amen, and get just what they need for the time as they need it to make sure that it will last the 7 years. We don't want to be, when we're on that path to God's plan for us, we don't want to be that one-hit wonder that flares up, amen, is glorious for a year, amen, and then for the next 6 years, we're living in famine. We burn out everything that God has given us, but we've got to be good stewards, as we see Joseph was. Joseph was a good steward with everything that God had put under his hands in the land of Egypt. Amen. So we're seeing a lot of things here. Go back and watch this one, because we looked at how to remember where our help comes from. But there's a lot of nuggets in here. There's a lot of wisdom in here that we need to keep in mind as we're walking along this path to God's purpose for him. And here's what I love. Here comes the blessing of it all, amen. Because sometimes we get so hung up worrying about, what am I going to do for my children? What am I going to do for my family? What am I going to do for my job? What am I going to do for my friends? What am I going to do for my church? What am I going to do for my wife? What am I going to do for my husband? What am I going to do for my parents, my aunts? What am I going to do for everybody else? Amen. And sometimes we get distracted from God's plan, worrying about what we're going to do for everybody else instead of worrying about what we're going to do for God. So let me close out with this one here. Verse 56, we're picking up at verse 56 of Genesis 39 now. And it says, when the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. and all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. So I just want to throw this out to you. You've gone through, and God has brought you through. God kept you from death. Amen. You might have been in slavery for a while, but God kept you from death so that you can have a chance. Danielle Davis, it's good to see you out there. Right. So you've got the first part good, right? You're thanking God for what he didn't allow to happen, and you're walking faithfully in what he has allowed to happen. You're working as though for the Lord. You've had the opportunity, and you've acknowledged where your help comes from. Amen. So now here's the thing. Don't get sidetracked by all those people that you think you've got to help. Amen. Because we see here from Joseph, as Joseph was faithful in what God called him to do, everyone around him was blessed. So if you walk in the purpose that God has for your life, if you walk in the plan that you have for your life, everyone around you is going to be blessed. And we're going to look at this. This is really, we're going to go into this in more depth later on in this series, amen, at how the people around us are blessed when we walk in God's purpose. But I just want to encourage you now, before we get to that lesson, don't get sidetracked by the job. Don't get sidetracked by the family that's having difficulties. Don't get, if God puts it on your heart to deal with those things, then deal with those things. But if God says, no, I want you to work on this today, don't get sidetracked with what others are dragging you into. Amen. You fulfill the purpose that God has in your life, and just the overflow of the blessings that God puts into you are going to take care of the child. They're going to take care of the parent. They're going to take care of the job. They're going to take care of your financial needs. They're going to take care of the church. They're going to take care of your ministry. Amen. So I just want to thank you all for tuning in today. It has been a blessing. I hope you have gotten something out of this. Now remember, God is going to put you before the people that you need to be before to fulfill the plan he has for your life. You don't know how you're going to get there, but when you get there, remember, don't get the big head. Say, it's only by God that I can do anything. It's only by God that I woke up this morning. It's only by God that I was able to get to the interview. It's only by God's strength that I can do anything. Amen. Remember where your help comes from. You have a blessed day, and I'm going to look forward to seeing you at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning. God bless, and you have a great day.